Hi there, beautiful dreamers. Welcome back to Emia Soleil Dreamwork. Today we're going to talk about something as scary as vampires, and I don't think I have ever met someone who I have never dreamed about them. Actually, vampires is one of the common oldest fears in humanity. It's an archetypal fear which origins comes from old tales and folklore, not least from Europe, where the legendary Prince Vlad ruled Transylvania. He was quite a cruel one, putting his enemies' heads on poles, and the vampire theme stems even longer back in mythology from when the very first woman, Lilith, was accused of sucking blood from infants, among other hideous things. So there's both cruelty and bloodthirst connected to these vampires, and thereby, of course, fear. So the first movie I saw on the vampire theme was Dracula, an old black and white film filled with shadows and lurking danger. And I watched it with my mom on a small TV during my summer holidays, and there and then the vampire fear was born in my life. But what's the use of being afraid of something that no one has ever seen or met in real life? Why waste time on losing our senses over some undead creature with fangs? Well, there is the tempting unknown, the tickling feeling of the dark, of course. So the 21st century's vampires have transformed into being more sexy than scary. Just look at the Twilight Saga and the Vampire Diaries, and I prefer to think that's a far more common therapeutic thing for humanity. Obviously, there are film producers too who turn these shadow creatures into some mixture of drug and sex addicts and biker gang personalities. That's typical for wanting to translate the unknown into something comprehensible. The most usual adapted symbolism, though, is energy vampires, people who steal other people's energy. And the concept has been so accepted in quite a weird way, actually, and being so used in every situation where someone feels drained and want to blame someone else for it instead of taking a look of their own pattern. I don't say it's a fact that there aren't individuals who need the other person's energy to keep moving, but we have a choice to change the situation, and that is done at first hand by looking at our own patterns. So back to the vampire, the thirsty hunter in the dark. I don't. I would like to show you a typical dream on the theme. It's a dream filled with fear, and this is quite an old dream belonging to a client of mine, who of course has said yes to letting me go public with it, especially since it's so long time ago, and some of the work also coming with it. The dream was a returning one. He couldn't even remember when it first started. But he could certainly remember when it stopped. And here it is then. I'm running in a big old house where I'm hunted by a vampire. I have been hunted before here, but I don't remember by who or what, and I try to find places to hide, and I also try to prepare to defeat the vampire. So I hide in a closet, holding a wooden stake in my hand with which I am planning to pierce the vampire's heart. I hear it now outside the closet, and I hold my breath, scared. And then the vampire opens the door, triumphantly, sure of its victory. And then he wakes up. So, what do we have here? The dreamer, the soul, is moving fast through an old mental construction, hunted by a really frightening and threatening aspect of him. This aspect, who he is fleeing from, is to start with unknown, but he knows what it is. It's a vampire, something threatening his life. Or he thinks he knows what it is, because to most, the vampire symbol is still, despite of the modernization of the vampire image, shrouded in darkness. So the soul is hunted, or is it haunted, in this old mental construction, an old pattern of thoughts. He tries to find places to hide, and hiding inside the thought pattern means not being able to leave it because of fear of facing it. See what it consists of. The dreamer is figuring out how to hide from and how to handle the vampire aspect in this old thought form. He has with him an object that in the myth is used to kill vampires. He doesn't know why he is there, why he is hunted, and why by a vampire, and he only has others saying about what a vampire is. Do you get it? The feeling of being chased by something threatening, something only familiar through others' fears is there. He didn't know what he was running from, but he was really afraid of it. This is a common theme in our lives. We run blindly when something is stressing us without giving us the time to stop and ask ourselves what it is and what it wants. When working with this dream repeatedly in therapy sessions, my client started to slowly alter the dream by asking those questions. And in the end of the dream, when the dreamer stood there holding his breath in the closet and the vampire opened it, he always had woken up, shivering in fear. But it changed one night. When he finally stood there face to face with the frightening hunter, he was stunned by the fact that the vampire was his best friend's wife. The understanding came to be that he was afraid of his thoughts where she was involved, his feelings for her. They symbolically put his life at stake. His head could easily be put on a pale if acting out or even giving words to this interest of this woman for given reasons. It was forbidden. And the scary vampire in his dream symbolized the risk of being shamed, alone, and hated. The therapy went on with looking at the thought pattern, the building, and the symbolism of both the friend and the friend's wife. What was it in her personality that he was attracted to, and why? Was he afraid to admit it even to himself? Why did he hide in the closet, ready to impale her, instead of stop running and ask why the thought of her was haunting him? Also, we have to remember the fact that he had had the dream for so long, even longer before he ever met his friend and his wife. So now let's look at the dream with new eyes. I'm running in a big house where I am haunted by a vampire. I'm stuck in a large thought pattern of age where I'm haunted by the thoughts of my friend's wife. I try to find places to hide, and I also try to prepare to defeat the vampire. I try not to think about her, and I also try to overcome her. I hide in a closet, holding a wooden stake in my hand with which I am planning to pierce the vampire's heart. In secret, I want to get inside her heart, but I know that will hurt her. I hear the vampire outside the closet, and then it opens the door and looks at me, sure of its victory. What I am running from triumphs over my attempts to stop thinking about it. My client was so disturbed over the fact that his feelings could cause trouble, that he was hiding from them. He actually wasn't aware of them until the dream changed, and the fact that he secretly wanted her to fall in love with him challenged his moral quite much. The building, the thought pattern was old, and it really turned out that he had been in it before, since his mom had fallen in love with someone else when he was a boy and left his father. And all the guilt, anger, and forbidden love was stored in that huge and scary pattern. His parents' emotional upheavals was just as scary to him as a vampire from the scariest movies, and therefore, when he seemingly did the same, not able to be forgiven thing, falling in love with his friend's wife, the vampire, helpfully enough, came along again, ready to play the bad and scary aspect, as before. So what happened? My client looked at his feelings, admitted them to himself, and accepted them. When going through the work, it turned out that he wasn't in love with her anymore. Rather, he was trying to find a healing outlet for the pain he has been carrying inside of him since he was a boy. He had taken on his mother's shame and guilt since he was closest to her, and he was afraid of his father's anger and grief. Released from his very secret love affair based on childhood trauma, he met a girl who he fell in love with. So lovely. Well, so the vampire symbol turned out to be both forbidden and scary in this case. Something threatening the life as he knew it. So let's move further on in the vampire jungle. So here's another dream, and this one is mine. And it's different than many on the same theme I have had through the years. I'm standing with my back towards north, wearing my old turquoise trousers. On my right side is a light turquoise wall that is at the same time an ancient organism. At the same time, I'm watching the scene from the opposite side, standing with my back towards south. There are more entities there present, and it's time to see and accept. It's kind of a judgment day, but without guilt. Quietly, I'm reasoning with myself, now being in the body with turquoise trousers again, about the fact that I am actually a vampire. I can't really understand how or in what way, since I don't live or act like one. But I get the understanding, though, that it has to do with earlier incarnations, where I have lived in lineages where there also have been vampires. I decide to accept this without judging. Well, what to do with this dream? Of course, it has to be broken down into the level 1. I'm standing with my back towards north. The I is in the dreamer and soul, have my back towards north, which means coming from, leaving, or turning my back towards my ancestors and their wisdom. I am wearing my old turquoise trousers. So trousers has 2 legs, hinting at the duality and thereby learning. Turquoise is both green and blue, which if thinking of chakras means heart and throat, learning about love and communication. On my right side is a light turquoise wall that's at the same time an ancient organism. Something as solid as a wall contains no duality, so the love and communication is one. And not only that, the communication of love is alive and it's ancient. When working with my dreams, I often feel so grateful and touched because, as it turns out, often the subconscious has been speaking to me on behalf of the soul, time after time, in the most essential and perfect symbolical language. The ancient living organism made of the art of expressing love was the sacred space of my heart. And all of you who are familiar with Drunvalo Melchizedek's wonderful teaching know what I'm talking about. Years ago I started doing the Unity Breath meditation, and in time I also entered the sacred space of my heart. This is quite a personal subject to me, but I want to tell you that in this space the walls were in a light turquoise color. And when wrapping my head around this vampire dream so many years later, finding out the scene of learning took place in the closeness of my heart, it just was one of those moments when you really understand how vast and unconditionally loving the universal intelligence really is. Well, back to the dream. At the same time, as I am standing with my back at the north, I am watching the scene from the opposite side, standing with my back towards south. So there's another watcher here. The soul is watching it all from the opposite side, and when the first me have my back against north, the second me is looking towards north, which means the soul is looking back on the wisdom of the ancestors. And so the dream continues. More entities are present, and it's time to see and accept. It's kind of a judgment day, but without guilt. When looking back, it's time to understand and learn. Without judging, and with a closeness to loving communication, the guilt is of no need, The entities are aspects of the soul gathered together in the closeness of the heart, ready to be forgiven by the self. Quietly, I am reasoning with myself, now being in the body with turquoise trousers, about the fact that I am actually a vampire. I can't really understand how or in what way, since I don't live or act like one. The scene is showing the transforming self, the still dualistic self, coming to understanding about judging oneself, and here comes the vampire theme. The dualistically oriented self who tries to move beyond judging oneself has given itself quite a harsh judgment before, as a vampire. The horrible, scary, bloodsucker one. But it seems somehow incomprehensible in the presence of the heart. And this is the ancestors' wisdom. Looking at oneself as a bad and sinful being is not possible when living in the heart. I get the understanding, though, that it has to do with earlier incarnations, which where I have lived in lineages where there also have been vampires, and I then decide to accept it without judging. Earlier incarnations, earlier doings, error, and ongoing family patterns. When it comes to being able to transform, it always starts with accepting, then forgiving oneself, the family pattern and the mistakes being done in the past. Being a vampire may then cover most everything that feels not accepted. Things that one thinks must be hidden and subdued, and therefore accepting being the vampire, even if not knowing how or under what circumstances, means accepting the fact that it's impossible to be perfect in every way. It doesn't mean we shouldn't work with things we need to change. No, quite the opposite. We shall, of course, watch ourselves from other angles than from inside our eyes, and seek to change the patterns which doesn't serve us. When it finally comes to the literal history of vampires, that's quite a long story, which have an even longer tail. But I think I just leave it here for today. But look up your vampire dreams and see with new eyes what the forbidden and scary creature is symbolizing. Ask what it wants and come to terms with whatever the answer is. Then just take it from there into your loving hearts. And remember, you don't have to be perfect to be loved. Bless you all, and thank you so much for watching. Bye bye for now.